Well, we are going to be starting week 2, where we are looking at the Satanic Bible examined, and we are comparing this book with Thomas Brooks's book, which is Precious Remedies for Satan's Devices. And so we're going to start week 2, and if you weren't here for week 1, kind of a background was we kind of looked at the historical nature of the Church of Satan and when it was started in 1966. Obviously, Satanism has been around a lot longer, and there have been other key proponents. But Anton LaVey in 1966 started the Church of Satan, and that was kind of when everything kicked off for him. And we kind of went through a bit of a historical sketch of his life, and then we started kind of looking at some introductions to Thomas Brooks. So here we are, week 2, and as kind of an introduction, I've got a slide here from The Guardian. This is something that had, in the news pretty recently, was a vandalism a quote, and I put that in air quotes, vandalism that happened at the Iowa State Capitol, and this was all over the news, where U.S. man accused of destroying Satanic temple statue, charged with a hate crime. Right? And this kind of thrust sort of Satanism, again, back into the popular discussion, pop culture, because we are starting to ask the question as a nation, does Satanism count as one of those religions that we're going to, that's going to be okay to pull into public life right alongside of everything else, okay? And what you would hear from Satanists is that it most definitely should be. Now, the reason that I bring this up is one of the things that is said in this article, and I'll just quote this. And this is from the Satanic Temple, and they say, the Satanic Temple makes clear that its members do not actually worship the devil, nor do they believe in either Satan's existence or the supernatural. Instead, Satan is used as a symbol of free will, humanism, and anti-authoritarianism. Okay, so you'll see this is actually one of the big. I would say this is along the same lines as Anton LaVey's LaVeyan Satanism, because remember, within Satanism, there's also the same sort of denominational schisms that happen within Satanism, the same way that it is within Christianity. And there are the Satanic Temple, which are these guys. This is one of them. You have LaVeyan Satanism from Anton LaVey and the Church of Satan, and you have different ones like the Temple of Set, which is a theistic Satanism that actually does believe in a supernatural satanic being that they work to conjure up, okay? Now, a lot of times, those are the ones that we think of when we think Satanism, right? We think like the spiritual supernatural being, but most of Satanism is actually this type, or Church of this Satanic Temple, or the Church of Satan type, which is more philosophical Satanism than it actually is theistic or supernatural Satanism. Does that make sense? So, in the article, it says tensions boiled over Thursday when authorities said a Christian and military veteran tore the Satanic Temple's statue's head off before surrendering to law enforcement to be booked with a count of criminal mischief. His name's Michael Cassidy, and this is what he said. The world may tell Christians to submissively accept the legitimization of Satan, but none of the founders of the U.S. would have considered government sanction of satanic altars inside Capitol buildings as protected by the First Amendment, to which I give a hearty amen. So what he said is, I saw this blasphemous statue and was outraged. My conscience is held captive to the word of God, not to bureaucratic decree, and so I acted. So I just think it's just interesting because that again is in popular culture and popular mindset, and we kind of like around this time of the year, it's very witchy. I mean, you turn on like anything from like Disney to Netflix to Hulu, and everything's witchy and satanic and like evil and spooky and weird, right? And this is actually a religion that goes on most, like all of the year, okay? And they start bringing the supernatural things out around Halloween, but really the far more destructive thing, the thing that I had said previously, you can't hate enough, is actually the philosophical Satanism that drives often the culture within America, right? So one of the big questions that I've been asking as I was reading through the Satanic Bible, which I will reiterate, I don't recommend. It's not, I did it so you don't have to. It is not a fun read. It makes you angry and feel a little gross. So I would say you can stay away from it, and here's the Cliff Notes. So today what we're going to be talking about is sort of what I would say is the devil philosophy, or the Satanic philosophy that's sort of weaved throughout the Satanic Bible. And the big question that I've kind of had going the whole time in my head is, what's the attraction? Right? What's the attraction to Satanism? Because it's actually a fairly, there's a fairly significant group of people who would refer to themselves as Satanists, and if not, there's a lot of people who are living like Satanists, even if they are not, in fact, identifying Satanists. But my question was, as I was reading through, like, how is this getting a hold of people? Like, what's the sell? What's the give? What's the benefit? What's the attraction to LaVey's Satanism? Like, what's the offer? And so what I've kind of done is I'm kind of summarizing his claim. And then from this sort of philosophical claim comes several offers that he sort of gives to people. So the claim, this sort of big idea, is that non-theistic Satanism believes that there is no God or afterlife because nature or the flesh is all there is. Accordingly, there's no significance, meaning, or happiness outside of what you make for yourself. Only the strong will survive. So instead of worshiping a God invented by hypocritical men that goes against nature, you need to save yourself, fight for yourself, live for yourself, treat yourself, exalt yourself, and become a God of your own making. And that's what a lot of people live for. And we always got to keep being careful that this is not how we live, right? But it's very, very much around that, like the flesh is all that there is. So instead of fighting the flesh, give in, because that's where you'll actually find true happiness. See, that's where you'll find a release from all of these things that Christianity has built up around. So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to show his perspective. So from this, what I would say is, from LaVeyan Satanism, here's what he offers, or here's what I would offer you, like speaking from his perspective. Here's what I offer you. Number one, you can be empowered to take control of your world. And who doesn't want to control their world, right? I mean, the thought of controlling one's everything is attractive. Two, you can live without guilt. And that is one of the fundamental human difficulties, right? Because we've got something written on our hearts that is constantly telling us that we have a conscience. And what he seeks to do is to sever one side of your conscience so that you can live guilt-free. You can live guilt-free. So that's offer number two. Offer number three, you can do whatever you want whenever you want to do it. Autonomy, right? And who doesn't like a little autonomy? Who doesn't want to treat yourself? Who doesn't want to just go wherever they want to go and do whatever they want to do and, just get in a van and fix it up and travel the world and be me and do everything that I want to do and live, right? I mean, it's interesting how embedded this is into, it's just this philosophy here, right? So number 4 is you can grow into the God or goddess that you already are. So I mean, you can be the God of your own life. And that right there is very attractive. And my warning is that, you don't have to be a confessing Satanist to live like a functional Satanist. And you can't, we got to be careful of having satanic desires, right? That are coming from, why do you think Jesus said, you are of your father? He was talking to the Pharisees, people who are religious. He said, you are of your father, the devil. They wanted things that were satanic in nature, but they never would have thought in a million years that they would never have thought that their father was the devil, right? So I think LaVey nails sort of the most vile, deceptive, and dangerous version of satanic philosophy. And because this, nature or the flesh is all there is, only the strong will survive. You have to save yourself. You have to become a god of your own making. And it's really interesting because I think that you just take how this affects marriage, satanic influence over men and women in marriage. They want to be the gods of their own house, right? I mean, and this happens in various ways with men and women who both want to just either control and do nothing or control and control everything. Right? I mean, this just like I'm telling you, this sort of version of Satanism is very, very embedded. So there's so from his perspective, kind of breaking this apart, there is no God. So from the outset, and this is a quote from Gabriel Andrade, who did one of the biographies, and he said, from the outset, LaVey clarified that Satan symbolized his dedication to atheism and materialism, and that he did not believe in the actual existence of the devil. Initially, LaVey was interested in occult magic. However, with time, LaVey moved away from occultist philosophy and became more interested in materialism and reproof of the supernatural. And so he actually, if you've ever heard of the famous Satanist Aleister Crowley, who came in the early part of the 20th century. He was into theistic, and it was more drug fueled, and it was a conjuring of Satan and conjuring of demons, and was fueled by drugs. And LaVey actually goes very hard against Aleister Crowley. But it's interesting because I feel like LaVey's form of Satanism is literally the way more, it's more deceptive, destructive, and it's actually more embedded in the world and even in our culture than we even see. So it's not the supernatural kind. It's far more scary, because of how deceptive it is. So. So this is a quote from him as well. It says, to the Satanist, God, by whatever name he is called, or by no name at all, is seen as the balancing factor in nature. There's no supernatural being. He says that this powerful force that permeates and balances the universe is impersonal, doesn't care about the happiness or misery of flesh and blood creatures on this ball of dirt in which we live. It's very materialistic, and if there's any kind of he wouldn't say deity, but this he would call it a balancing force of nature that is impersonal and just does not care. And so that's why it's left up to us to do whatever we want to do down here, right? Which, so another thing that he says, so Anton LaVey, this is a quote from him, there's no afterlife. He says, there's no heaven of glory bright and no hell where sinners roast. There's no right, there is no wrong, nor God, nor son, nor ghost. Death endeth all for every man. He goes on to say, blessed are the death defiant, for their days shall be long in the land. Cursed are the gazers toward a richer life beyond the grave, for they shall perish amidst plenty. So you see, like he just it's like nothing beyond the grave. Live as long as you can. Which is really interesting. Like you think of like how like our quest even at the biotechnology, like in biotechnology of like, prolonging the human life, hacking the human genome, like never dying, like there's some kind of like, there's a lot of interesting connections here into the way that we think as people here in our current culture. But for him, he's saying there is no afterlife. And so, and the next one is it's survival of the fittest. And so Satanism, this is a quote from him, from LaVey again, Satanism is a blatantly selfish, brutal religion. It is based on the belief that man is inherently a selfish, violent creature, and that life is a Darwinian struggle for the survival of the fittest, and that Earth will be ruled by those who fight to win the ceaseless competition that exists in all jungles, including that of urban societies. And so, like he's pushing this sort of like very, very naturalistic and very, Darwinian and very Freudian view of the universe. And this is very much at the core of a lot of cultural perspectives today. He says the strongest instinct in every living thing is self-preservation. And so it's all about you, preserving you, living for you. And so these 4 offers that he gives, and I'll run through them really quickly. All of these are basically all about control and manipulation of your world. And this is what's really interesting in magic. We're going to deal with that in, I believe, the 4th week. We're going to be dealing with his perspective on magic and spells and all that kind of stuff, which is very, very interesting, because how do you deal with magic and spells, and what do they do when you don't have a supernatural view of the world, right? So it gets very interesting. But all of these offers sort of revolve, and everything that he does revolves around control and manipulation, like manipulating the people around you, manipulating your environment to control it and to ultimately get what you want, right? So he says in, number 1 is you can take control of your world. And so he says, the Satanist, realizing that anything he gets is of his own doing, he takes command of the situation, and instead of praying to God for it to happen, positive thinking and positive action add up to the results. I did not lift that from Your Best Life Now. I literally lifted that from the Satanic Bible, okay? That's just, just the power of positive thinking and the work to take control of the situation and just get what you want, because it's all about getting what you want, which is amazing how many places where Christianity sort of it grabbed a hold of that idea, and it kind of took one part of it out, but it still said, now you can control and manipulate God to get what you want. Right? That's how satanic and deceptive it is. And it's just off that much that this is why I say you can't hate this enough. You cannot hate devil philosophy enough, because it's so close to the real thing. So offer number 2 is you can live without guilt. So he says, page 67 of the Satanic Bible, he says, just as Satanist does not pray to God for assistance, he does not pray for forgiveness for his wrongdoings. Why? Because nothing you do really matters. There's no right or wrong. So you have to determine, again, so if you're not looking to an objective standard to determine right or wrong, right? By what standard are we defining right or wrong? What are you looking to for how you determine right and wrong? Because everybody still does it. He does it, like all over the Satanic Bible. But what does he do? What does everybody do? You do what you decide is right or wrong. Every man does what he thinks is right in his own eyes. Right? That's it. You can live without Guilt. So he says Satanists view the world as neutral beyond the concepts of a benevolent or treacherous good or evil. Satanism enables the Satanist to codify his life beyond an ethical and metaphysical straitjacket. So because it's and how many times have you heard this? Like, it's like holiness and the things of God, it's just such a straitjacket. It tightens you up. It makes it to where like you can't do anything, right? And it's almost, I still remember that illustration of the fish. It's like, it's like he says like, man, get out of the water, breathe the fresh air. Don't be confined to this water. But the thing is when a fish gets outside of what its nature is, it dies, right? I mean, so the claim is you can do whatever you want without guilt. Just don't be bound by the straitjacket of any kind of ethical thing. Offer 3. He says you can do whatever you want. This is another quote from him. He says, life is the great indulgence, death the great abstinence. Therefore, make the most of life in the here and now. And it's crazy because like it's like in one sense you're like, yeah, make the most of life. But it's like just off enough, right? Because he's kind of saying that like because there's no God and there's no morality, there's no holiness, there's no God to account for, you just do whatever you want to make life worthwhile in the here and now. And then you see Jesus on the other hand saying, what does it profit a man if he gains the whole world and loses his own soul? Right? It's just like, it's so counterintuitive to this satanic philosophy. He says, life itself is but a spark in the gloom that flashes out and disappears. Why, therefore, not make the most of the here and now, here and now? And I just can't help but like think of like, even like modern marvels like of like festivals like, Burning Man or something like that, where it's just this revelry in pure hedonism and flesh and sex and music and debauchery. Why? Because there is nothing left and you got to just do whatever you want to do in the here and now. And I'm telling you, like that is the thing that's actually more like that's what draws people in. So young people, I just want you to know, like, don't be sucked in by this. It looks so good. I mean, anyway. So the fourth offer is you can grow into the God or goddess you already are. And so he says, say unto thine own heart, I am my own redeemer. Say pridefully, who is like me? Have I not been too strong for my adversaries? Have I not delivered myself by my own brain and body? It's pride. It's quintessential pride at its core, right? So again, my warning is you don't have to be a confessing Satanist to live like a functional Satanist. One quote from the book. This is a very telling quote. I'm going to slow down on this quote. I just want you to take it in here. Listen to this. He says, times have changed. Religious leaders no longer preach that all our natural actions are sinful. We no longer think sex is dirty, or that taking pride in ourselves is shameful, or that wanting something someone else has is vicious. Of course not. Times have changed. If you want proof of this, just look at how liberal churches have become. Why? They're practicing all the things that you preach. Satanists hear these things in similar statements all the time, and they agree wholeheartedly. But if the world has changed so much, listen to this, why continue to grasp at the threads of a dying faith? If many religions are denying their own scriptures because they are out of date and are preaching the philosophies of Satanism, why not call it by its rightful name, Satanism? That's its rightful name. That's what it's doing. And that's what's happening in these liberal churches. So, that's the dark part. That's the Satanic Bible. That's the philosophy. Those are the offers that he gives. Switching over to, in the other corner, we have Puritan Thomas Brooks. And no one can match Anton LaVey, Aleister Crowley, any of these guys cannot match what's going to come out of Brooks. And the reason is because at the end of the day, whenever you flick a light switch on, the darkness scatters. That's what light has, that effect in a room. When you turn the light on, the darkness flees. So, Brooks, this is 2:1 of Brooks. This is one of the, he kind of talks about, what Satan does, and then he gives several remedies to encounter this satanic philosophy, okay? So what I want to do is I want to kind of paint you a picture that Brooks talks about Satan, and then I want to give you a couple of remedies to fight this type of Satanism in your life, right? Because we all have, we still have grains of that nature, right? That have to be killed, the sin that has to be put to death, right? Okay, so Brooks 2:1, Satan presents the bait and he hides the hook, okay? So he's got good promo. He has got great trailers for the movie. He has got, if you look at like how beautiful how incredibly fun and appealing something like Burning Man is, it's very different from when you're coming home and the guilt and shame and destruction that is waged in the lives of young people all across this nation. Right? And here's the thing this happens all the time. He presents the bait and hides the hook. And so Ephesians chapter 6, verse 10, it says, finally, be strong in the Lord and in the might of his strength. Put on the full armor of God so that you will be able to stand firm against the schemes of the devil. Or as it says in the King James, and where Brooks gets us, these devices of the devil, right? So, Genesis 3, 4, and 5, and we're going to be looking at this later this morning. And the serpent said to the woman, you will surely not die, for God knows that in the day you eat of it, your eyes will be opened and you will be like God, knowing good and evil. And the thing that I want to point out is that the fruit was the bait, the death was the hook, right? Presents, like again, remember what Brooks is saying, like Satan presents the bait and hides the hook in it. And the hook is like what's going to destroy you. And so Brooks says, Satan's first device is to draw the soul into sin, to present the bait and to hide the hook, to present the golden cup and hide the poison, to present the sweet, the pleasure, and the profit that may flow in the soul by yielding to sin, and to hide from the soul the wrath and misery that will certainly follow the committing of sin. And you can see that very, very easily in that original interchange between humans and Satan, right? Because after they did it, did they feel good knowing good from evil? No. What did they feel? Shame. Absolute internal shame. They hated themselves. Like they hid. They wanted. It pushed them away from God. That's the hook, right? This is the hook. It's hidden by the bait. So he says. There is an opening of the eyes of the mind to contemplation and joy. And then there's an opening of the eyes of the body to shame and confusion. He promises them the former, but intends the latter. And so Satan cheats them, giving them an apple in exchange for paradise, as he deals by thousands nowadays. right? This is the continual thing of Satan, and this is what he is continually doing. Is he's trying to, he presents the bait, he hides the hook, and he destroys. That's how he destroys. It's a little bit of truth in this scheme to grab everybody. He says, Satan with ease pawns falsehoods among us by his golden baits. And then he leads us and leaves us in a fool's paradise. He promises the soul honor, pleasure, profit, but pays the soul with the greatest contempt, shame, and loss that can be. By a golden bait, he labored to catch Christ. He shows him the beauty and finery of a bewitching world, which doubtless would have taken many a carnal heart. And he's saying, even you think about how Satan tried to tempt Christ. It's this continuous thing of presenting the bait, and the bait always looks beautiful and desirous and good and lovely. That's what's so scary about this stuff, right? You can't hate it enough. You can't be are you afraid? You need to be more afraid of this, right? Because it's so deceptive. One thing that Brooks says, and I think this is beautiful. He says, adversity has slain her 1,000, but prosperity her 10,000. Sometimes it's not even a bad thing. It's even prosperity itself that can become a snag or a snare. And I just finished listening to a book by Jeremiah Burroughs that he talks about how dangerous it is to have things go right and to actually have the things that we want, to have plenty as opposed to being in need. He said there's far more satanic devices and traps in that than there is from not having what you need. That's the crazy thing. It's a wonderful book. Another Puritan that I highly recommend. You can get it on Hoopla, for free, and it's really good. So it's by Jeremiah Burroughs. But getting back, so there are 4 remedies that Brooks puts out here, and these are just kind of practical ways that we can sort of resist that. That we can encounter this idea of Satan presenting the bait and hiding the hook. Okay, so remedy number one is keep a lot of distance between you and sin. Don't look at it or play with it. Remember, he's trying to catch you with it. Okay, so sometimes, the fact is we don't go all in on we don't go all in on the bait and on the hook. I mean, what happens with a fish? I mean, usually a fish is coming up. I mean, I'm not I'm looking at Joe right now. I've been fishing enough to know sometimes it just comes up and kind of bings at it, nibbles at it. You kind of feel like a little of this, little boom, and then boom, and it's over. And then you're in the boat, and then you got a knife to your throat, and you're bleeding in the boat. That's probably a little too graphic, but sorry, this is the reality, right? I mean, this is literally what's happening. So remember, he says, keep a lot of distance between you and sin. Don't look at it. Don't play with it. Don't pause on it in a feed. Don't play with this stuff because it will get you and kill you. He says, first, keep at great distance from sin and from playing with the golden bait which Satan holds forth to catch you. For this, you have Romans 12:9, which I love. He's like, for this, you've got a scripture, right? Which is so good because you think of how did Christ defeat Satan? He's like, oh, I got a scripture for you, buddy. And this is so I have truth because truth is the light that dispels the darkness. So what he says, for this you have Romans 12:9. Abhor that which is evil and cleave to that which is good. Abhor evil, right? When we meet with anything extremely evil and contrary to us, nature abhors it and retires as far as it can get away from it. The Greek word that is rendered abhor is very significant. It signifies to hate it as hell itself, to hate it with horror. You can't hate this enough. Right? This is what I'm saying. Like you can't play with it. You can't bat it. You can't pause on it. You need to get away from it. And if you keep seeing it in the feed, you need to delete the app. Now, I'm telling you, you don't want to be playing with this stuff. And I'll say specifically one of the ways that Satan tempts in a crazy fashion is through pornography and through sexual lust. I mean, we see it take down heroes of the faith, right? We see it take down heroes of the faith. And they didn't just start there. They started somewhere else, much smaller, when they were playing with the bait, nibbling at the bait, at this nice little shiny thing. Right? This is the scary part of it because it's so easy to get caught up and to go in. And here's the deal is these temptations, you don't want to have anything to do with. You want to stay as far as you can away from it. Right? So he says, it is our wisest and safest course to stand at the farthest distance from sin, to not go near the house of the harlot, but to fly from all appearance of evil. I mean, how many times does it say this throughout Scripture? And then how incredibly callous do we get, right? We float by and we're like, right? Because there's the bait. And the bait looks good. So, he says, and I think that, this is just true. The best course to prevent falling into the pit is to keep the greatest distance from it. He who will be so bold as to attempt to dance upon the brink of the pit may find by woeful experience that it is a righteous thing with God that he should fall into the pit. You stand on the edge, that's the place that you're going to fall in. Don't go near it. Don't go near it. He says sin is a plague. Yes, the worst and most infectious plague in the world. And yet, how few are there who tremble at it, who keep distance from it. Listen, when you are feeling like secure is usually the greatest moments where you can be tempted. Right? He's saying tremble at it. Stay as far as you can away. So that's remedy number one. Keep a lot of distance there. Remedy number two. Consider that sin is always deeply bitter after it is sweet, okay? So this is a truth. This is like the truth that we've got to see, which the truth is that the seeming sweetness of sin will quickly disappear only for shame, sorrow, horror, and terror to enter the room. Like, it's not going to be long. So you almost got to be thinking 2 steps ahead. If I go ahead and grab a hold of this, it's actually going to destroy me. So you play that out in your head first, right? You start thinking about what he's really telling you as opposed to getting enamored by the bait that he's showing you. You got to be thinking like, listen, if I go down this road, I will shipwreck my family. My kids are going to be growing up without a dad, right? You go there and you're like, understand what Satan is actually trying to do with you rather than just, this is just a little thing, no big deal. Everybody does it. 113 million porn users daily active in the United States. Right? So there's just all of this stuff that and it's not just that, it's any temptation. Because remember what I said last week, whatever you like, there's a temptation for that. If you're doing well, there's a temptation for that. If you're in difficult circumstances, there's a temptation for that. If you're a guy, there's a temptation for that. If you're in leadership, there's a temptation. Like literally, it's just all over. right? So consider that sin is always deeply bitter after the sweet. The seeming sweetness of sin will quickly disappear only for shame, sorrow, horror, and terror to enter the room. And so he says, forbidden profits and pleasures are the most pleasing to vain men who count madness mirth. I love those like old-timey like language, who count madness mirth. Many long to be meddling with the murdering morsels of sin. Another great line. Meddling with the murdering morsels of sin, which nourisheth not, but rend and consume the belly and the soul that receives them. Many eat that on earth what they digest in hell. Remedy number, there's one more quote here from remedy number 2, and this was a big one. After the meal has ended, then comes the reckoning. Men must not think to dance and dine with the devil, and then to sup with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob in the kingdom of heaven, to feed upon the poison of asps, and yet that viper's tongue should not slay them. Right? And it keeps going back to this idea, like understand that the bitter is going to come after the sweet. Keep far distance away from the bait. Don't play with it. Don't look at it, right? Don't stay away from it. Remedy number 3, consider that sin will bring the greatest and saddest losses that can ever be upon the soul. Think about how much and this one of the things, I'll just pause here on something. This is one of the things I love about the Puritans. And the reason why I am so proud of that Reformed tradition, that they basically took all of this great theology and they dwell in it. And they just keep looking at it from a different angle and then another angle and then another angle until it soaks into your soul. Okay, think about this. Consider, because we could just pass this on, but look at this. Consider that sin will be the greatest and saddest losses that can ever be upon the soul. You just think of where everything from, I think about even things that are truly practical, even marriage. You think of how bitterness and how sin inside of a marriage, it's the saddest, it brings the saddest losses. Because something that's supposed to be beautiful and reflect the glory of God and be a joy becomes a war zone, right? You think about instead of being able to, even with young people, you think of how many places where it's you start listening to the voices of friends who are ungodly and listening to them, and you watch the shipwreck of young people that throw their lives away. It's the worst and saddest losses. Man, that's the thing that we got to keep in front of our head. When we're seeing the dangling of the bait, just think, no. And you see this, right? Because in movies, we watch it, right? We watch things in movies, and sometimes you're looking at you're watching the scene play out, and there's everything as you see where it's going, and you're like, no, don't do it. This is the worst and saddest thing that could happen. But a lot of times we're not thinking about that in our own lives. This is why I'm saying sin is very, very deceptive. Satanism is very deceptive, and it will bring the greatest and saddest losses. And so the thing that Brooks says, and I think it's very true, the worst part is that sin ushers in the loss of that divine favor, which is better than life. It's not just the fact that your world will be destroyed, but in the end, you don't get to taste and see that the Lord is good. That's what your soul was actually made for. That's the thing, is the saddest part is a life lived that is not lived to the glory of God. A life that's lived that is not delighting in the law of the Lord, that is not loving God's words and wanting to have them in their soul, right? That's the saddest losses. Remedy 4. He says, Simply consider that sin is extremely deceitful and bewitching. See, a lot of times we trust ourselves a little too much around things that we shouldn't trust ourselves around. We trust ourselves a little too much. I mean, there's reasons why you need to, you keep that distance. Why do you keep that distance? Because you understand how bewitching it is. You don't want to come near it, and you know how extremely bewitching it is, how incredibly deceitful. This is what Brooks says. He says, sin is from the greatest deceiver. It is a child of his own begetting. It is the ground of all deceit in the world, and it is in its own nature exceedingly deceitful. And he says, but exhort one another daily while it is called today, lest you be hardened through the deceitfulness of sin, right? Hebrews 3:13. He says, it will kiss the soul and look enticing to the soul, and yet betray the soul forever. It will with Delilah smile upon us, that it may betray us into the hands of the devil, as she did Samson into the hands of the Philistines. Like it's like one of those things. I mean, you think about like Samson, right? Samson is just enamored with this beautiful woman in this relationship. Young people, be careful who you are dating, who you are spending time with. Be careful of your friends. Be careful of who you are placing yourself around. You think about like Samson. Samson was one of the strongest, baddest guys on the planet. And he saw it multiple times. And here's the thing is he didn't think it was that extremely, you think about it, he didn't fear it. He didn't fear it. And so he kept staying real close to it. He failed to see how extremely deceitful and bewitching it was until that day when his hair was cut by the woman that he thought was amazing. And we know the rest of the story. It ends with him. We do see some beautiful redemption of God, but we also find him blind and crushed at the end of it, right? We just got to understand that sin is deceitful, and this form of Satanism is the worst kind. I'm not really afraid that people are going to run out and start getting like a book of spells and become a warlock. I mean, like how many people are doing that? I mean, now don't get me wrong, people are, and actually, you look at Disney Channel and Disney and the expanding Marvel universe and how many witches are in it, right? There's a lot of stuff like that. But the thing that I think is even more scary than all of that and more destructive than all of that is this version of Satanism that is really the bedrock of where a lot of our contemporary culture lives. This is what it is. I'll close with one additional bonus quote from Brooks, and I just thought this was, he gives an illustration of an ancient character, Theotimus, and he says, when the physicians told Theotimus that except he did abstain from drunkenness and uncleanness, he would lose his eyes, his heart was so bewitched to his sins that he answered, then farewell, sweet light. He'd rather lose his eyes than leave his sin. Sin has a bewitching effect. Sin is dangerous. Sin will destroy. Sin will eviscerate everything that it touches. It is deceitful, and we need to keep a lot of distance from it, consider what's going to happen afterwards, understand that it brings about the saddest losses, and respect how bewitching this whole thing is. So let me pray for you all, and we will be done for the morning. God, we are so thankful that you give us your word and that you do not just leave us to wallow in sin. We are glad, so glad, because of Christ, that you have conquered sin. Lord, we are so thankful that we do not have to be held captive by it. We are so thankful for your word. We are so grateful that you give us your spirit and you call us to fight valiantly, to fight sin. And we know that, as Pastor Matt shared a couple of weeks ago, that it is not just us fighting sin, but it's actually you doing the work. And Lord, we are so thankful that you do that you strengthen us, that you help us. And Lord, I pray specifically for everybody in this room, Lord. I pray that you would open our eyes to the bewitching deceitfulness of sin. God, that you would cause us to want to stay far from it. God, that you would cause us to just to want to be in your word, to know you, and Lord, just to find all our pleasure in you, all our joy in you, that you may be glorified in us as we run from sin. God, we love you. We thank you for everything. And it's in Jesus' name I pray.